Ranked Battle Ladder is transitioning to the Regulation G rule set on May 1st, and it'll be the first format in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to feature the restricted legendaries from this and previous games. So think the cover legendaries, things like Groudon, Kyogre, as well as DLC legendaries like the previous Calorexes. Many of these are very hard to obtain, especially when you want to test a lot of them quickly. So I collected some of the top rental teams online that you can use to test on the Battle Stadium ladder yourself. Huge thanks to Atalanta for sharing many of the teams that were featured on this list, as well as VGC Pace and VGC Parties as another great team aggregating resource. I'll have all of those linked in the description below. I also created 5 of these teams myself in game, so if you enjoyed these videos and appreciate them as a resource, please subscribe to the channel. And now let's get into these teams. So starting off simple, we have a series of Trick Room teams. This one is focused on using Dawnwing's Necrozma to basically go for an Expanding Force next to Indeedee and Psychic Surge Psychic Terrain. This does a ton of damage, especially when you have Helping Hand. You can also follow me with the Indeedee to guarantee a Trick Room setup on the Necrozma. And another cool fold on this team is Meteor Beam Power Herb, which is able to get the drop on Incineroar, which would otherwise like to switch in on your Psychic type Expanding Forces. You can just straight up knock that out. And then the rest of the team is focused around hitting really hard in Trick Room. Gallade is really good for setting Wide Guard in the field to protect against Calyrex Shadow Rider. Ursaluna with Flame Orb Guts does a ton of damage with Facade and Earthquake, as well as Headlong Rush. And then a Terrifier Torkoal with Eruption does crazy damage when you're moving first in Trick Room. And then Lilligant is a cool mix-up option where you can go for After You in Chlorophyll or in Sun, using your Chlorophyll ability to double your speed. Either go for Sleep Powder to put opponents to sleep, or go for Terrifier Eruption, go for After You, and guarantee you're moving first on the Torkoal that way, and really surprise opponents that way. I also found an alternate version of this team with a lot of similarities, some different Terra types, but a couple move choice changes, Swords Dance on the Ursaluna, and then a bit more offensive of a Torkoal and a Gallade. Scope Lens gives Psycho Cut and Leaf Blade, I believe, a 50% chance to crit, so when you're going for a Terra Grass, those crit sharpness Leaf Blades are doing insane damage, and then Psycho Cut as well doing a ton of damage to any super effective or even neutral targets. And then the Choice Specs Torkoal just does a lot more damage than the Charcoal one, so definitely if you want a bit more offensive of a variant, I would go with this one instead. So this is a Trick Room team featuring Calyrex Ice. Calyrex Ice is definitely something that everyone was really excited about as a restricted Pokemon, just because the bulk is really crazy, the power as well, and the Glacial Lance move is, a lot of people are calling it a $90 move. You need to pay for the $60 Sword and Shield, plus the $30 DLC, and this move definitely makes it feel worth it. It's just so strong. With Clear Amulet, you're immune to Intimidate from Incineroar as well as Parting Shot, which means you're really hard to mitigate the damage of. This one's Terra Fire, so you can't even Will-O-Wisp it. And then the rest of the team is focused on getting that Calyrex Ice running. We have Coaching on Mienshao plus Fake Out to stop things, let you get Trick Room up, and then Wide Guard to protect you from a Calyrex Shadow. Frigoraph stops any priority from interrupting your turn, specifically Fake Out. Amoonguss can be good to redirect any pressure from you, and then Follow Me for anything like an Amoonguss that comes on the field that would try to Spore around your Rage Powder and put your Calyrex to sleep in Trick Room. You can switch in Ogerpon and Follow Me away that Spore. And then Torkoal is an alternative option to beating Amoonguss, where you can just go for a Terrifier Eruption and knock it out in Trick Room that way. On this team, we have Lunala as the Trick Room setter, so the main advantage of Lunala over Necrozma Duskmane is the ability to use Wide Guard, and that's pretty important when you are 4 times weak to Astral Barrage from Calyrex Shadow. Aside from that, again, it is a power up set with Moongeist Beam. Really good options there, Terra Fairy to Terra out of any weakness to Dark. Now the rest of the team is actually pretty balanced oriented outside of the Ursaluna. A lot of people favor Lunala as a restricted in formats for that specific purpose. It can function as a speed control setter or just an offensive bulky Pokemon, which really lets you use varied team compositions. I do feel like Ursaluna is in a good spot this metagame, just being able to sit on Astral Barrage against Calyrex Shadow Rider, as well as do a ton of damage back with Earthquake next to Wide Guard Lunala, is definitely a cool combination. This is a Groudon team I took from an online competition, one of the few Groudons that has been able to go deep in a large tour. This one got top 16 at, I believe, the Victory Road Spring Challenge, with a really cool composition. One of the weaknesses of Groudon is that its spread attack, Precipice Blades, is only 85% accurate, so it's hard to justify it as a sweeper, as a setup Pokemon, where you can just like go for a couple turns of setup, then miss both of your attacks. So this Bronzong on this team kind of remedies that, going for Gravity to both ground flying types, as well as raise the accuracy of Precipice Blades to 100%, as well as give you opportunity to set up those by going for Trick Room and then Hypnosis. So if things are asleep, you can set up Swords Dance and they can't protect in Trick Room, and you can just knock them out with Precipice Blade. So A lot of cool stuff on this team, definitely worth trying out. Now we're going to be switching away from Trick Room and into a different speed control, namely Tailwind. So Tailwind is a really strong offensive strategy where you're able to just overwhelm your opponents by doubling your speed. And this really benefits a lot of the faster spread type attacking restricted Pokemon like we're going to see. But we will start off with Kyogre. So one thing you'll notice about the Kyogre and the Urshifu on this team, they're not going for offensive Terras and Terra Water like people have done in past formats. This time we're going Terra Grass on both, which has been very common just because of the prevalence of Amoonguss and Rillaboom as pretty much the only counters on people's teams to these Pokemon. So being able to Terra out of that weakness and really just abuse them being on the field is definitely super cool. We also have Serena, which blocks any priority that would hit you before you Water Spout on the Kyogre and lower your damage output, as well as having Helping Hand to boost up your Water Spout after you have the speed advantage in Tailwind, and then Taunt to stop Amoonguss from even sporing you, so you don't even have to commit the Terra on the Kyogre to Terra Grass. This Calyrex Shadow Rider Tailwind team is really similar to the team that Wolf Glick was able to win the first large tournament in Regulation G, except a lot of move choices and Terra types are a bit different. Wolf was a Focus Sash Terra Ghost set. This one is a Life Orb Nasty Plot Terra Fairy one, so essentially focusing on being able to Terra out of your weakness to Dark, namely, as well as go neutral against Ghost so that you're not getting knocked out by those, and also heal up any damage after a Nasty Plot. Basically go for Terra Fairy +2 Draining Kiss and heal all the damage back up while potentially taking a knockout. And the rest of the team is very similar, going for Tornadus Rain Dance plus Urshifu, Choice Scarf Surging Strikes as a secondary damage option, and the rest of the team is just focusing on supporting that Calyrex and getting those nasty plots up. This hyper-offensive Koraidon Sun team has seen some success as well. Basically, you're trying to set up Tailwind with your Tornadus, and then Koraidon is just really threatening. You also don't even have to go into Tailwind because the Sun set up by Orichalcum Pulse sets up your Fluttermane's Photosynthesis, at which point you can just go for an Icy Wind plus Terrifier, Flare Blitz, or a Collision Course and do a ton of damage without even needing to set up Tailwind. Of course, Chi-Yu dealing crazy damage with Sun boosted, Life Orb, Overheat, and Heat Wave in Sun as well, and then the rest of the team is just trying to support and let you get in those positions to spam your really strong fire moves. There's been another really strong Koraidon team that's been making the rounds, but I wasn't able to find a public rental, and I already made 5 others for this video. So if you want to see that team as well as other serious tournament teams as the season progress, please let me know in the comments below. And yeah, moving on to the next team. This Eternatus team is similar to something that was doing really well in Regulation E. It was a team piloted by Kyle Livinghouse to a top 8 at a regional. And essentially the only change here is that the Eternatus used to be a Glamora, still with Power Herb, but I guess the only difference was a Earth Power over Dynamax Cannon. The focus of this team is really to use Beads of Ruin on Chi-Yu to elevate the Eternatus to a high level of damage output, as well as use Fluttermane's Icy Wind plus a Speed Booster Energy to allow the Chi-Yu, which has a fair amount of bulk actually, to outspeed things that would otherwise outspeed it and knock them out, as well as in situations when you can't do that, survive unexpected hits and then take knockouts that way. This Kyurem White team is really interesting. We haven't actually seen much Kyurem do well in tournaments, but I think it's one of the restricted Pokemon that people are kind of sleeping on. I think it does have a spot in the metagame. This is an Assault Vet set, taking advantage of the decent coverage options that Kyurem has. Icy Wind and Freeze Dry are great utility. Blizzard just being very spammable in snow, which both the Tornadus' Snowscape and the Ninetales' Snow Warning can set up. You also get really bulky with Assault Vest and the Snow Boost, boosting both your special defense and your defense stats, so you can get the opportunity to go for a lot of Blizzards and potentially get a lot of Freezes. And then aside from that, you can just go for Aurora Veil plus Calm Mind on the Primarina, or just go straight on the offense with Urshifu and Ogerpon Wellspring form. The last Tornadus Tailwind team is actually a Terapagos team. Typically people use Terapagos a bit more defensively, but we have been seeing more success in tournaments using this Choice Spec set. This one has a fair amount of coverage moves, but we did see a Terra Starstorm Sleep Talk set do pretty well in a tournament. But aside from that, this team has Sun to boost a Chi-Yu like we've been seeing on other teams, and then Fluttermane with the Icy Wind. Once again, just trying to boost up your special attackers and slow things down with Fluttermane. And then to round it out, we have an Amoonguss to protect your Terapagos, and then an Urshifu to swing the battle in your favor when you don't have the speed advantage necessarily with a Tailwind or an Icy Wind on the field. Just go into Choice Scarf, Terra Water Urshifu, and spam Surging Strikes to clear things off the field that way. This Miraidon team was able to top cut a large tournament, and it has a lot of interesting pieces. We haven't seen a ton of Suicune, but with a Terra Dark Snarl, if you get Tailwind up, you can go for Snarl against Calyrex Shadow, as well as wall out its Psychic and Ghost type moves. Inner Focus means you can't get Fake Outed, so you can execute that pretty consistently. You also have Helping Hand, which is really interesting option on the team, able to boost your Electro Drifts and your Terrifier Ivy Cudgels to insane levels as well. This Ho-Oh team tries to take advantage of Ho-Oh's natural bulk, essentially trying to set up a Tailwind, Clear Amulet to stop any Intimidate shenanigans from Incineroar, and then just go for Brave Bird, Recover, Sacred Fire to pester your opponents through the course of a battle. You're generally able to outlive a lot of teams with Regenerator on Ho-Oh and Amoonguss, as well as Pollen Puff to heal back anything like Raging Bolt, Rillaboom, or Tinglu that can't otherwise heal. And then when you have Tailwind up, you can go to your Urshifu once things are chipped down and knock them out with a Terra Dark Wicked Blow. Moving off of Tailwind compositions and to a bit more balanced speed tier teams, we have a Terapagos Calm Mind team. So this is really more in line with the type of team you're generally going to be seeing. So a lot of tools for the Terapagos here that you're going to want to become familiar with if this is a Pokemon you're interested in. Amoonguss, Incineroar, Rillaboom, of course. Very common partners. Choice Scarf, Terra Water, Urshifu is there to basically keep your opponents on their toes so they can't just pivot around your slow damage building Amoonguss, Incineroar, Rillaboom, and Terapagos. You have the Urshifu that can kind of burst on the field and break a hole into your opponent's team, as well as force any Terras for your defensive Terras out of things like Incineroar that will allow Terapagos' Terra Star Storm to pick them up easier later in the game. Then lastly, we have a Scream Tail, which is interesting. Basically, anything that tries to counter setup on Terapagos is susceptible to getting Encored. Any fake outs, again, Encore disable bait, so it can be really disrupted to have the Scream Tail on the field at the right time. The Zacian team is interesting in that it's a little more slow building than previous Zacian teams we saw in Sword and Shield, where it was an offensive powerhouse. Now you have to play it a little bit slower, more principled, take advantage of Zacian's natural bulk. So here we have a Tinglu Dondozo, which is a common composition in previous regulations, but not so common now. But your focus is really just to go for a Sand Tomb plus Yawn, as well as Wave Crashes, Ruinations, just to really break down your opponent's team, kind of bug them slowly over the course of the first couple turns, and then bring in Zacian plus Gouging Fire, or Gouging Fire plus Urshifu, go for Howl, set up the physical attacker, and then sweep from there. Basically, in Sword and Shield, Zamazenta was entirely outclassed by Zacian, but a lot of people are favoring Zamazenta this generation just because it does get Iron Defense Body Press now, which is just really incredible damage, as well as set up defensively. Aside from that, Pelipper just synergizes really well with Zamazenta, being able to knock out the fake out Pokemon that try and pivot in and out of it to slow it down, knock them out with Hurricane or Weather Ball, as well as set up for Urshifu as a really cool offensive option. So they can't just slow play the Zamazenta, they do have to cover for the Rain mode as well. And then we have a bunch of Glumons to allow the Zamazenta to set up consistently in the Amoonguss, Incineroar, and Raging Bolt. Rayquaza was able to get top 16 at a large grassroots tournament, ultimately only losing to Wolf in the top cut. This team uses Swords Dance plus Clear Amulet, Terra Normal Extreme Speed, kind of a substitute for Dragonite that also gets the utility of Airlock to shut down weather teams, which is, really common in this metagame, so definitely a lot of value there. Chin-Pow boosts the power of your Terra Normal Extreme Speeds, and honestly your Dragon Ascents, flying types, kind of unresisted coverage in the metagame. There's not a ton of steel types or rock types that can resist it, so if you get a free turn to go for Dragon Ascent, it's usually taking a knockout, pretty much always at +2, but a lot of the times even at neutral if you have Sword of Ruin on the field. And then we have Ferrograft to block any fake outs into you, as well as switching into something like Calyrex Shadow, as well as set up Trick Room against other Trick Room teams, basically reverse it so you're not caught against a Trick Room team, which can otherwise be kind of problematic. Calyrex Ice, obviously not great against Rayquaza, but you do have a Incineroar to handle that, as well as Terra Water Amoonguss, which you're going to try and get Spores off against it with. Palkia is in an interesting spot in this metagame. It gets a 20 base stat boost to its speed compared to the regular form, but that's still slower than the 135 base stat Pokemon, so you're not really getting that much value out of it. So this one actually opts for Trick Room, so everyone's expecting you to be quick, so if you play against a Tailwind team, you can actually use your natural bulk to set up Trick Room. Beyond that, if you're not operating in Trick Room, you have Life Orb Entei, which does a ton of damage with Sacred Fire, as well as Terra Normal Extreme Speed, and then an Icy Wind Fluttermane to enable your Urshifu, Palkia, and Entei to sweep teams that don't have Tailwind, just with the Icy Wind and their natural speed stats. This team is really cheesy. It's essentially focusing on using the Dondozo boosts, knocking out the Tatsugiri while it's in Dondozo's mouth, and then getting Mewtwo in to go for Psych Up plus Stored Power and Recover. Mewtwo has great natural bulk, so if you get those defense boosts, you're kind of chilling. And then the Stored Power boost is just going to do insane damage with your high special attack and the stab boost, as well as being immune to Amoonguss. Spore with safety goggles is definitely a very interesting combination. And the way you activate the Tatsugiri's Toxic Orb and basically get it down to 1 HP so that it will faint the first turn Dondozo was on the field, is you go with Explosion on Regieleki turn 1 while you're enduring. So that's a really cool combination. Definitely a very cheesy team, might not work as well if your opponent knows what they're doing, but definitely a fun ladder team earlier in the season. This last team is more slow paced. The focus of it is really to set up Light Screen, Reflect with Grimmsnarl to make your Giratina basically unknockoutable, especially after a Calm Mind. And then Glimmora can set up a Mortal Spin, poison everything on the field. If it ever gets hit, Toxic Debris will go up as well. They're really forced to attack into the Glimmora because you have Power Herb, Meteor Beam. You're really forcing a KO. They can't afford to ignore it. You can also Thunder Wave things to get them status, and all of this is to the end of getting your Giratina in a position where it can hit +1 or +2 Hex and knock out everything out. Also, Leftovers plus Grassy Surge means you're healing a ton, especially behind Light Screen and Reflect. That's often enough healing to survive the whole battle, and overall just a very bulky, annoying team that can be fun to position around online. So that is 20 rental teams for the start of the Regulation G rule set on Battle Stadium. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps to show your appreciation. I made 5 of these teams myself in-game, as well as taking some time to research the rest of the teams online. So again, if you appreciate that, please subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite team was and what teams you want to see more from. I'm definitely going to be making a new video with some more meta-relevant teams later on in the season, so let me know what teams you want to see. And yeah, with all that being said, peace y'all.